This is where the theme song will go when I get some funds to invest in the show. Till then, we're all stuck with this introduction to Generation Apocalypse with Nat Murphy, who's basically just some guy. Hello, and welcome to Generation Apocalypse, the show for people who care about the world and they're tired of pretending they don't. My name's Nat Murphy, and I'm your host. And at least I'm tired of pretending I don't care about the world. I mean, watching everything that's happening to it and just going like, yeah, oh yeah, this very predictable things that keep happening. Anyway, so this will be a first of a bonus episodes I'm doing for Patreon. Although this one will be kind of for everyone, kind of get the little taste to see if you like it. And so my plan is to do for now regular episodes every other week, and then on those off weeks to do a bonus episode, like 20, 30 minutes long, where I kind of look at a specific principle, which is what I'm doing today. I'll go into that more, and or just kind of terms. A feature I'm calling keywords of the apocalypse, right? It's inspired by 20th century rhetorician Raymond Williams. I would say Raymond Williams. Pretty sure about that. Where basically he wrote a book called Keywords, and where he looks at just like very kind of common words like freedom, democracy, and stuff like that, and saying, these things not only have different definitions, but right, people kind of adhere to those definitions and talk past each other, right? And so this is kind of inspired by that kind of idea of okay, well, let's kind of define these things in certain ways. I'm not doing what he's doing. I'm doing more like, okay, this is how I take these things, and this is, on, this is how I use these terms. I think they're more helpful. I think it's, there's a lot of confusion out there these days. And right, the whole point of this channel too is to cut through some of that confusion so that we can just talk to each other better. Um, and the type of show today where I'm looking at principles, right? Usually like, okay, here's this principle that I use to kind of guide my stuff. And this one is I'm looking at an organizing principle, which is exactly like it sounds, right? This is the principle that makes everything else that I do fit together. And this is the biggest one. It's a life. It's about life. Capital L. When you hear me talking about life on the show, it's always a capital L. It's kind of that's my jam. I'm going to go, much more into that. Um, and you'll see. Hopefully, you'll along and kind of see what I mean by life and what I mean by using it as a guiding principle and like this kind of as a way to just organize everything else you're doing, everything else you're seeing in the world around. Okay, it's for this purpose, right? So that's what I'm going to be doing right now. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to start. I'm just going to read a very short piece from a philosopher, the turn of the 20th century, Alfred North Whitehead, a philosopher, mathematician, and stuff like that. And he wrote a book called. Wait, hold on. Let me get. Okay, so this is from Alfred North Whitehead's book, Function of Reason, which I got off of archive.org maybe like a decade ago when I was working on my dissertation. This is just something that has really spoke to me, and over the years since then has really helped me kind of put a lot of things into focus, right? About the way I see the world and the way what I want to be doing in it. Um, so anyway, we'll start reading this. Need the specs on. I see, and I gotta read off my phone here because there's no way I can see the screen there. All right, let's start with the introductory statement. So history discloses two main tendencies in the course of events. One tendency is exemplified in the slow decay of physical nature. With stealthy inevitableness, there is a degradation of energy. The sources of activity sink downward and downward. Their very matter wastes. The other tendency is exemplified by the yearly renewal of nature in the spring and by the upward course of biological evolution. In these pages, I consider reason in its relation to these contrasted aspects of history. Reason is the self discipline of the originative element in history. Apart from the operations of reason, this element is anarchic, right? So there's a lot there, right? But basically, like he's putting reason, right, as a kind of intellect part of our intellect that kind of decision making, right, processing, all that stuff, however you want to do it. And again, I would separate reason out from other things. Again, I'm not a 19th, or earlier century philosopher, right? They're obsessed with reason and this and that, right? Not really my jam, but the same idea, like our thinking, right? And here you see he's situating it. He's not talking about it as just a human thing, right? He's talking about history and stuff like that, but he's situating, biological evolution in that. Like anything that has a history, right? Anything that has that is in, it's either just kind of doing its own thing, or there's some sort of, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, right? And all these different creatures actually, humans are not the only ones who make decisions, right? And kind of silly to think we are, right? And we'll kind of go into that more, right? Hold on, let me put on the next page. Someday I'll learn to do that seamlessly, but until then, meh. Anyway, right? So chapter one. The topic here considered, the function of reason, is one of the oldest topics for philosophical discussion. What is the function of reason amid the welter of our mental experiences, amid our intuitions, our emotions, our purposes, our decisions of emphasis? In order to answer such a question, we have to consider the nature of reason, its essence. Of course, this is a hackneyed theme. Its discussion stretches back to the very beginnings of philosophic thought, but it is the business of philosophers to discuss such fundamental topics and set them on the stage illuminated by our modern ways of thinking, right? So it's a nerdy job, but somebody's got to do it. So, such a great prologue, man. Right? But now he goes into, the part where he's basically going to crap on the idea of, you know, I mentioned like separating reason out from other things, right? Various phrases suggest themselves, which recall the special controversies depending upon the determination of the true function of reason. Faith and reason, reason and authority, reason and intuition, criticism and imagination, reason, agency, purpose, scientific methodology, philosophy and the sciences, rationalism, skepticism, dogmatism, reason and empiricism, pragmatism. There's like he wants you to notice like all these philosophers, right? They'll do this stuff, right? They're like, this is what reason is like this. It goes with this and goes with this. And of course they're right. Reason does go with those things. And then the other philosopher comes around. He's like, well, no, reason goes. And of course it does. It goes with those other things. It's like trying to say it's only with these things and not with the others is like, are you really looking at, or are you really even talking about the same thing? If we're you know, we're just shaving off piece of it and say, okay, this is what its true essence is. Saying, let's not do that. Let's look a little bit more, right? And hold on, let me put on there's going to be 4 slides, so we're more than halfway there. Don't worry. Oh, look at that. Coda came to join us for this one. What a sweet kid. Right. So each of these phrases suggests the scope of reason and the limitation of that scope. Also, the variety of topics included in them shows that we shall not exhaust our subject by the help of a neat little verbal phrase. So he's saying, basically like, let's stop doing that. Yet. But, in despite of this warning to avoid a mere phrase, I will start with a preliminary definition of the function of reason, a definition to be illustrated, distorted, and enlarged as the discussion proceeds. I love that because I also like to distort, enlarge, and illustrate things, right? Verbally and such. Um, so the function of reason, right, is to promote the art of life. And this is the big thing, right? That everything we do, every bit of education we have, whether it's formal and informal, is your grandparents teaching you something when you're little, or whatever, like all this stuff is to promote, right? Certain kind of not just survival, right? Because that's not what he said. The art of life. There's so much more to living than just mere survival. And that's what he's going to go into next. Hold on. This will be the last slide. The last slide of this. I promise. In the interpretation of this definition, I must at once join issue with the evolutionist fallacy suggested by the phrase the survival of the fittest. The fallacy does not consist in believing that in the struggle for existence, the fittest who survive eliminate the less fit. The fact is obvious and stares us in the face. The fallacy is the belief that fitness for survival is identical with the best exemplification of the art of life. This is one like I love that so much, right? And again, this is if you look at probably like a decade or so before Peter Kropotkin, mutual aid as a factor in evolution, right? So there's other people thinking about this too. Is like, yeah, no, survival of the fittest, right? Is certainly there. It's a part of evolution, right? But as the main driver, as the main kind of engine for that, it doesn't. It kind of falls apart in a lot of ways. It's certainly not sufficient. It's not enough on its own to explain the diversity of life we have on this planet, or even like a tenth of that diversity, a hundredth of that diversity. It's just its explanatory power only goes really so far, and it's something I still hear today, where people just like, oh well, it's got to fit into this. It's like, does it though? Because I look around at living things all the time, and they're not just humping, right? They're not just like there's more. There's more, right? But anyway, right. In fact, right, and going back to Whitehead's words, right? In fact, life itself is comparatively deficient in survival value. Right, this is awesome, right? The art of persistence is to be dead. Only inorganic things persist for great lengths of time. A rock survives for 800 million years, whereas the limit for a tree is about 1,000 years. For a man or an elephant, about 50 or 100 years. For a dog, about 12 years. For an insect, about 1 year. The problem set by the doctrine of evolution to explain how complex organisms with such deficient survival power ever evolved. Right? He might be going to overplay his hand there a little bit, but I love it anyway. It's such a it should make you think, right? Because it is like, if survival is the only purpose of life, non-living things are way better at it. Like, just way, 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 way better at it. So maybe that's not the most purposeful purpose, right? They certainly did not appear because they were better at the game than the rocks around them. It may be possible to explain the origin of the species by the doctrine of the struggle for existence among such organisms, but certainly the struggle throws no light whatever upon the emergence of such a general type of complex organism with faint survival power. This problem is not to be solved by any dogma, which is the product of mere abstract thought elaborating its notions of the fitness of things. The solution requires that thought pay full attention to the empirical evidence and to the whole of that evidence, right? And that is really, the big takeaways, is that any category humans come up with to help explain the world will never fit the world, right? The world is so much bigger. Life is so much bigger. Life is a messy bitch. Stop trying to fix her, right? She doesn't need it, right? Instead, we should be trying to understand her, right? Right? Trying to understand life the best we can, not trying to fix it, not trying to say, okay, it's got to fit in this category, it doesn't fit in this category. That's this definition. Our definitions should always be, just transitory, right? In that is knowing that, you know, we are going to change these definitions. We're using these to help look at things so that we can see what we're missing, right? And if we don't always, if we're not vigilant for what we're missing, we're going to miss a whole lot, because there'll always be more than what we're saying, right? So that's what I'm going to try to keep doing. Is like, okay, here's this concept, here's this idea, and it's very helpful. Okay, but it's missing out so much of the world. It's just missing so much of life, and that's really where we're going to take issue. Um, but before I go on, I just want to go back to where he says, um, it's the beginning of this paragraph, right? Um, oh, where says he's going to join issues. I think that's such a great turn of phrase. People should do that more often. I join issue with what you have to say. People will be like, ah, dude, wait, what with the you did what to my issue? I'm joining it. I'm not on your side. Anyway, hold on. That wraps up for the Whitehead portion, and I'm gonna kind of expand on that. Hold on, I'm gonna put up another slide, which be here for. Okay, so let me put that all in some context, right? So I started my undergrad. I have a bachelor's in philosophy. About 2002. Did about 10 years for my undergrad, because was a primary caregiver for a few kids, right? So I was raising kids at the same time as going to school. Just did part time. But anyway, over that decade, right? for me, the two guiding questions, right? What is a good life, right? It was a good human life, um, put now, right? And what is a good society, and how do they fit together? To me, there's always that question, right? And how do they fit together, right? Like you need to have both, right? A good society is where people can have good lives, right? You kind of have good lives outside of a good society, but not really because we're social animals, right? You need that. Like there's a certain amount of, not goodness attached to a life that is, spent in, you know, shitty society, right? So we all are kind of, there's a lot of us are really starting to recognize these days. Anyway, like, so that's where kind of this came in, right? So these have already been my guiding questions. And around the time when I was, hunkering down on my dissertation when I was, ABD or what have you, 2016, 2017, um, kind of what is humanity's place in the world, right? Saying like, what is a good society is important for understanding what a good human life is, right? And again, there's not one, right? A good society does not have one version of a good human life, right? A good society has many, many, many versions of good human lives, right? That's super important, right? We're not talking about one thing. We're not going to, what's the one right way to live? Like, uh, good. Good is the right way to live. Right? What does that mean? Well, sit down. I hope you have years to take it all in. Like, of course, there's a lot of versions of that, right? But I, came across the limits of that question of just asking how those two things fit together. And it's like, how does humanity, how do societies fit into the world around them? Because they all do, right? And all the things that, people come up with, all the little ways of doing things like have to do with their environments, right? Have to do with living in the places where those, people live for generations and adapting to it and making part, they're also adapting the environment to them and them, adapting likewise, right? Symbiotic, relationships is the most, is the norm, right, of this planet. If it wasn't, um, if it stopped being the norm for this planet, you'd probably all die within the next week or two. Right? Because you microscope inside our bodies and the outside of our bodies, we're little civilizations, each and every one of us, right? All types of, microscopic organisms, right? Inside, outside, everywhere. That if they were not there, we would not be there either, right? But even on a much larger scale, right? Even okay, personally, we're in a world, right, full of all types of, symbiotic things that are going on that, are required for what we see existing, right? Same thing with human societies, right? And kind of, especially now, is very easy to see as, you know, the society or group societies, however you want to put it, that have been intent on separating themselves out from the world and kind of mastering the world and dominating the world separately, right? It's broken the planet and it's all fallen apart. And there's really nothing good or redeemable about a lot of society. I mean, might be a few things, pieces here and there, but again, once you move them out of those, they'd flourish and become something like, oh, well, it's almost unrecognizable. It's so much better, right? Crappy societies really are crappy. Like, let's stop kidding ourselves about that. They're bad, right? Um, we have certain criteria, and again, very basic ones, very low bar stuff, where we can be like, yeah, no, that one's not good, that one's not bad, right? Oh, you're, built on the misery of millions, built, highest, prison or population, imaginable in the history of the world. Like, so, there's something wrong with you, right? You don't meet the lowest possible bars, right? Anyway, right, and that right, that is not what this episode is about, right? So we're gonna move on, right? But then we get that question: what is humanity's place in the world? And then we ask, what is human life? Not what is a good life, right? That's an important question, right? About, particulars and stuff like that. But right, what is human life? What are we? Who are we? What is our place in the world? What is the human version of life? How do we connect with all the other life on this planet? Right? This amazing, wonderful planet. What's our relationship here? What's our responsibilities? Right? Are there any? I think so. right? I think a lot of people think so. Um, and just all these together is just kind of guiding questions for everything, right? And if it doesn't fit into this type of thing of looking at, okay, how do these, different levels fit together, individual lives to societies, right? To societies within the world, to humanity, right? Um, and all those kind of layered together, right? To me, should guide everything we do, right? Because, right, we want to live the best life possible. And right now, we're kind of, we're mucking up a lot of stuff. And so we really need to pay attention to these questions and say, okay, how can we make sure that humanity has a good relationship with the rest of the world, right? And that human societies, right, have, a good relationship with their particular environments, the particular lands that they're, a part of, right? And then how those societies, affect the individuals within those societies, right? And all those things are all interrelated, different scales, right? And different things like that. But all of our research, all of our science, all of our, everything kind of fits into the stuff. And if it doesn't, it's like, well, what are we doing? Right? Why? Right? If it's a hobby, it's a hobby, right? But if it's supposed to be like serious intellectual work, like this is my life's work to establish this thing that doesn't fit into human life, right? That doesn't make human life better, right? That isn't even asking questions about how it would, right? To me, that's like, eh, you might get lucky and get some good results, but most likely you're just spinning your wheels. You're just going down some dead ends, or, you're just devoting your life to a hobby. Um, which hobbies are good and important, but right, the reason why we have a word hobby rather than, life's work. And while one person's hobby could be another person's life work, if your life's work is nothing but what everyone else would consider a hobby, you know, it's like look at the game of chess, right? You're not going to really research and come up with a whole lot of new stuff with chess, right? It's a fun hobby, right? But devoting your life's work to is like what do you hope to accomplish? To me, it's like you're accomplishing being good at a game. Okay, that's good. It's a good hobby time, but it's not you know your essence being fulfilled. I personally don't think, but putting that aside, I do want to kind of have a little proviso here. Hold on, I said this was going to be my last slide. It was almost my last slide. I got a bonus one for you. Okay, we're joined by Coda, who is telling you that no, MF, you would not walk away from Omelus, right? And of course, referring to Ursula K. Le Guin's, right? Those who walk away from Omelus, right? Something that I think at this point we're all kind of cultural touchstone. We have it, right? And so there is something that I kind of chafes me a little bit, right? When people talk about right this about this story and kind of think about, oh, I would walk away. I wouldn't put up with that. It's like, yes, you would, right? Honestly, right? Just like with the Milgram experiment, like everyone's like, oh, I would never shock the person. It's like two-thirds of people did, right? There's a good chance you would have, right? And as far as walking away from omelets, right? And so one of the things that Ursula K. Le Guin did, you know, very, very well, right? And one of the best storytellers of the 20th century, and certainly one of the best big idea storytellers of the 20th of all time, I think, right? And but one thing she does is she looks at extreme cases, right? You look at the dispossessed, right? Like, okay, here's this society is trying to do their utopian thing, but it's on the most desolate, awful, barren planet, right? So, there's limits to say, okay, at this extreme limit, how do what do we see, and how does that make us think about the world at its not extreme limits, right? And Omelas is like that too, right? And the Omelas, it is perfect society. Everything about it is 100% awesome. It is a realized utopia, right? It's not like our society, which has some good stuff and then, has a lot of crappy stuff. It has nothing except for one thing, right? All that goodness relies on one sacrificial human, right? Child. It's kept in this box. It's all the tortures of everything. And you say, okay, well, and then at a certain age, people, realize, get to know that, like, okay, everything, your perfect society, again, so good. Everyone has a good life. Everyone, nobody suffers. Nobody, and not even everybody's thriving. Everybody's, following their, best selves. Like it's a perfect place, except for this one thing. And very few people in the story, right? Again, a statistically insignificant, right? Basically, it happens, but not often. Some people will just walk and be like, that's too much for me, man. I know I can't change it, so I'm just walking away, right? I cannot accept, right? I can't be a part of it, right? Even though I'm not directly causing it, right? I just can't be a part of it, right? It's a limit case because here's the thing: we do not live in almonds, right? Or mouth, however you want to pronounce it, right? We live in a society that is built on the suffering of millions of people, right? You go to a store, you get, you get your smartphone like that. Like that's built on the suffering of many, many people, right? Your houses you live in, built all of it. It's all built on suffering all around us, right? Here's the thing, right? People aren't walking away and they're not getting a perfect society in return, right? So the idea that you would walk away from a perfect society because it's built on the suffering of one person, right? When you're not walking away from a so-so society, it's built on the suffering of millions. Let's stop pretending, right? Let's stop fooling ourselves, right? That's not what the story is. The story isn't supposed to shame you into walking or pump your ego like, oh, I'd be one of them. That's who I identify with. It's like, sure, everybody's supposed to be repulsed by this idea, right? And then you're supposed to realize that's not even what I'm on offer, right? Like that's not what, like I don't live there. I live in a much crappier place. It's built on a lot more suffering, and again, I don't have the option. I mean, of walking away. You do have the option of walking away, but here's the thing: it's really, really hard, right? Really, really hard to walk away from everything you know, right? All the people you know and love, right? It's very hard to walk away from that. But also, we don't have to walk away because we can perfect, right? We can improve what we have, right? Um, so when someone doesn't walk away from omelets, right? You shouldn't, right? You should be repulsed by it and be like, okay, yeah, now I can see why you do that, right? But that's not my situation. I'm not even being offered that. Like I'm being offered something so much worse, and yet I'm accepting it, right? It's about what you accept, not what do you walk away from. As she wants you to see, right? And that's a lot of times I want you to see too, right? Is that there's, we look at these limit cases, we look at concepts, we look at these things, right, to help us, you know, look at put it back in and think about it all together and be like, okay, well, yeah, there's this thing, and it seems like it makes sense, but it's leaving out all this other stuff that really seems important, right, for life, for human society, for all these things, right, for a good life, for individuals, for the world at large, all this stuff, right? So we're looking at, okay, what's missing, right, and you know, it's life. Right? Here, let me get rid of Koba here, Coda. Wait, hold on. Look at me, I'm figuring it out. We're all learning here. Huh? That was loud here. Um, anyway, so I just want to wrap this up. Kind of explain, I guess, a bit on the outro right here of exactly the point of this, right? Is to look at life, right, as this guiding principle, as we have organizing, right? What we should be looking at, how we should be looking at, why we look at it, right? I mean, because me personally, I'm just obsessed with life with a capital L. Like I love life, right? And I know a lot of other people do too. And there's just, it doesn't, you don't need another reason to me. It's like you don't need the universe to like tell you you have a special purpose or something. Like it's like we got a free ticket for the most awesomest ride in the universe, right? And we get to play with it and we get to be a part of it. We get to, experience it and we can affect it in major ways, right? It affects us in major ways, reciprocal relationships and stuff like that. Like it's so awesome. that why wouldn't we use it to guide everything we're doing to make the best of it, right? To make the best of human life in general, which means to make the best of, of human societies and the way they fit into the other life around them, which also, means the way that human societies affect the individuals that live in those societies, right? And all those things together, right? And using life as that organizing principle. Okay, well, how can we take everything that humans do, everything that's in the world around us, how can we organize it around that? And with the, my regular episodes, that's part of what I'll be doing, right? And like the first three are just looking at, to me, worldviews, how we even understand the world, and then we'll kind of go into it more throughout, right, the following weeks, and really kind of applying this kind of general principle and saying, okay, if you really, jive with this, where you're like, yes, I want to understand my world in this way, right? Because right now, you got to if you want to understand the world in this way, you got to do a lot of research on your own. You got to do a lot of reading, a lot of digging. I mean, it takes a lot of effort, right? And so what I'm doing is just say, okay, well, I've done that. I spent the last couple decades doing that, just for whatever reasons, and here I am, and so I'm just sharing what I have found. And if this is useful, right? If the idea of just thinking about the world in a different way, but in a way that celebrates life, in a way that it doesn't put up with the, okay, yeah, we're just going to shave off life and shave off this part of existence and throw it in this box here, and then we can kind of understand it. And we're like, oh man, now we understand life. It's like, if that kind of way of approaching the world and way of approaching learning and knowledge and acquisition and sharing and all those things just doesn't sit with you like it does it with me, this is what I'm offering, right? To try to put things together in a way that they all make sense around these organizing principles, right? Where you can move up and down the ladder, where these concepts travel, right, from one scale to the other, um, and can kind of unite all these different concepts in the world, all this different stuff going on, because there is a certain unity to world, right? There's, is there. We can all travel. It's just that we're so small that everything seems so disjointed that putting all together, to me, we just don't have a great models for putting it all together. And that's what I'm offering here in Generation Apocalypse. I hope you stick around. Again, this will be the kind of episode I'll be doing for members only on Patreon, and then on YouTube, and such. And I'll see about figuring out other places again. I guess I need to check my watch. I'm getting old, right? All that stuff. And so the regular shows episodes. I hope you like a guy who forgets what the hell he's talking about in the middle of what he's saying, because that's me. Like, you found a friend. Anyway, I hope to see you guys soon. I hope you visit me on Patreon. I hope you visit me on YouTube, where I'll be putting up the regular episodes where, again, I look at, bigger concepts, bigger things, bigger patterns, and how they, understand the world. Just a different way of looking at what's already there. And these smaller episodes, just, a little bite-sized chunk. You're looking at principles, or looking at very, very circumscribed, very, neat little concepts that don't need a whole hour's worth of me rambling about. Although I could probably fill it with pup names if you give me a chance. We do love those, don't we? I do. So I hope you do too. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Hopefully, Generation Apocalypse. My name is Nat Murphy. It's been a pleasure having you. This is where the theme song will go when I get some funds to invest in the show. Till then, we're all stuck with this introduction to Generation Apocalypse with Nat Murphy, who's basically just some guy.